So we're here now to introduce the poster challenge finalists. I've been asked to emphasize that each of our presenters will have 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes to present an overview of their poster. So the Innovating Texas Poster Challenge will recognize products and technologies being pursued commercially that have the potential for positive impact. From 23 entries, our judges have narrowed it down to 6 finalists, 3 from academic institutions and 3 from industry. The entries were judged on several factors, including their level of innovation and potential commercial impact on the U.S. economy. I'd now like to introduce our first finalist in the academic category, chosen by our panel of judges to present their pitch to the conference audience. Now, our first presenter is Ashlee Brunaugh, and the notes I've been given say the Ashlee Brunaugh, so I want to say doubly impressive, Ashlee. So please join me in welcoming the Ashlee Brunaugh from the University of Texas at Austin.
That's good. We don't need the slides. Okay. Good morning. My name is the Ashlee Brunaugh. I am a Ph.D. student at UT Austin and co-founder of CloXero, a pharmaceutical company that is spun out of technology developed by myself and my supervising professor, Hugh Smythe. CloXero is developing a game-changing new therapy for non-tuberculosis Mycobacterium lung infections, or NTM. NTM is a rare and widely neglected disease that affects more than 180,000 individuals in the U.S. If you're unlucky enough to contract NTM, you'll be exposed to severe and debilitating symptoms, including unrelenting cough and fatigue. As your body tries to fight off the infection, progressive lung damage occurs that eventually leads to death. Despite this poor prognosis, there's this really widespread belief in the NTM community that the treatment is actually worse than the disease. To cure the infection, patients must take at least 3 antibiotics for up to several years. The high doses of these antibiotics and the prolonged duration of exposure leads to severe toxicity. These patients experience side effects ranging from chronic stomach upset all the way to kidney failure and hearing loss. The complicated nature of the regimens, as well as the poor tolerability, often leads to early discontinuation, which promotes bacterial resistance and often leads to infection relapse. NTM patients have been largely neglected by the pharmaceutical industry. There's been only one FDA-approved product for NTM, Arikayce. Arikayce is an inhalable form of the antibiotic amikacin. Despite the triumph of its approval, Arikayce is plagued by many of the same problems that affect off-label NTM treatments. The medication is delivered to the lungs using a nebulizer, which is a bulky device that requires a 20-minute administration time, a lengthy and complex cleaning procedure based upon its water-based delivery mechanism. It also requires an external power supply. Now imagine having to take this every day for several years. The failure of NTM treatments represents an enormous burden to the healthcare system of $1.7 billion. But it also represents a tremendous market opportunity to the company that can develop a therapy that is both acceptable to patients as well as capable of overcoming this resistant infection. At CloXero, we have addressed the pain points that are typical of NTM treatments with our product, CZIP-17, which is the first available dry powder inhaler system for NTM lung infections. CZIP incorporates an antibiotic called clofazimine, which is an off-patent, FDA-approved drug that is highly active against even the most bacterial-resistant strains of NTM. The oral formulation of clofazimine, despite its beneficial antibiotic activity, is associated with severe toxicities and slow onset of action, which has made it only be used for compassionate use pathways. With CZIP, we have taken this highly beneficial molecule and reformulated into a form that can be safely inhaled into the lungs. We couple this proprietary powder formulation with an existing FDA-approved device to further de-risk our development pathway. This device fits in the palm of your hand. The patient simply presses a button, inhales, and within seconds, the dose is delivered to the lungs. Because we use a powder formulation, there's no risk of bacterial contamination, as there is with water-based nebulizer systems. Our product differs from other dry powder inhalers in that even at very low inhalation flow rates that are typical of a very sick or pediatric patient, The same dose is consistently delivered to the lungs. Once inside the lungs, our formulation is not absorbed into the rest of the body. Instead, it rapidly accumulates inside the lung macrophage cells, which is actually where the NTM resides. This means that we get very high drug levels at the site where it's needed the most, low full body exposure, therefore less side effects and better efficacy. NTM is considered an orphan disease by the FDA, which means they are desperate to approve therapies for this indication. They make it as easy as possible for companies to get approval. They offer numerous regulatory incentives, as well as 7 years of additional market exclusivity. We have so far raised $3.6 million in non-dilutive SBIR funding to support preclinical development, and are currently seeking $11 million to carry us through our phase 1 clinical trials, after which we'll seek acquisition by a larger pharmaceutical company. For too long, NTM patients have been neglected, but at CloXero, we are committed to delivering better breathing to these patients. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ashlee. So our next presenter in the academic category is Dr. Hadi Ghasem from the University of Houston. And if I'm pronouncing that wrong, feel free to point out my error in front of all these people.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hadi Ghasem from University of Houston. It's a great pleasure to be here to talk about new durable coating technology. These are anti-icing coating technologies. If I can change the slides. Okay, thank you. Icing is a critical problem in a wide spectrum of systems, starting from power transmission system that you see on the left-hand side to the aircraft. If you have traveled in the winter, you know that you should wait in the aircraft for the de-icing fluid to be applied on the aircraft before taking off. And every time you are going to take off, you need to apply this de-icing fluid on the aircraft. And also, in other forms of transportation systems, this icing is a critical problem, for example, trains and the cars. Icing is also a critical problem in the vessels that are traveling in the Arctic region. It may lead to malfunctioning of the sensors, cancellation of the missions, and several infrastructure costs for the Navy. For the DoD application, there's a wide range of applications that are suffering from the icing problems, and addressing the icing problem is one of the urgent needs in the Air Force. On the right-hand side, you see a radio transmission tower that is completely covered with the ice, which is a huge problem. Looking at the energy sectors, icing also is a huge problem. For example, for the wind turbines, formation of the ice on the wind blades change the aerodynamics of the wind blades, leading to loss of the generated energy and sometimes shutting down the whole wind turbine. The current solution is using some helicopter to fly over this wind turbine to spray the icing fluid on this wind turbine every time that ice forms. Also, for some new applications, such as the drone, icing is a big problem. We cannot operate drones in the icy condition. For example, we have a customer that are using these drones to deliver medicine between the hospitals and clinic during the critical conditions, and in icy weather that this medicine is mostly needed, they cannot use these drones. After several years of research in my group, we have developed a new environmentally friendly coating technology that can address this icing problem. This is the highly durable coating that can be applied on a surface with a thickness of half of your hair thickness. It's now commercialized through a startup company called Surfland, and it's tested by a third party on the aircraft engine. You can see that on the left-hand side is the aircraft engine with no coatings, and on the right-hand side, the aircraft engine with the Surfland coating that has been applied. This test has been done in icy wind tunnels. This technology has been recognized in several occasions. It has been one of the top 3 innovations of the NASA iTech program. It was the second winner of Texas Venture Capital competition. It has received the private seed fundings, and also it has received the SBIR and SCTR grants. Currently, we are partnered with the Boeing and Air Force to apply these coatings on Air Force aircrafts. This project couldn't be possible without having a great team for this company. Brian Hutchinson is a native Texan, is the CEO of the company with material science background from Harvard, and also business background. I'm in charge of the technical aspect of the company. Payman is also a scientist working on technical aspect of the company. Angela is taking care of the marketing side of the company, and we have 4 new employees that are joining us next week. Surflant has a mission to address long-standing icing problem and they bring a better quality of life for people in the winter. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hadi. Our next finalist in the academic category is Dr. Kevin Dean from UT Southwestern Medical Center.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Kevin Dean. I'm an assistant professor at UT Southwestern. And we have recently put together what we call the Microscopy Innovation Lab. This is a place where we can work closely with biologists. We sit down, figure out what problems they're facing, and then develop technologies that address those concerns. As part of that, whenever we figure out something that's actually valuable and widely adopted and we think could be useful to a greater biological community, we then want to spin it off. So just last month, we filed for our first company, which is what I'll be talking about today. So the problem that this specific microscope is facing is that people now want to image entire tissues. We all know tissues are not transparent. It's very challenging to maintain high optical resolution throughout an entire tissue. And so we immediately have to make some adjustments and develop some new technology. Different types of techniques that people would like to do is, say, catalog every cell that exists in a tissue. The Broad Institute is now undergoing this effort. Other people are trying to map the entire circuitry of the brain. Ongoing people in a more clinical setting are taking biopsies and trying to identify biomarkers for disease, or trying to identify the source for heterogeneous drug responses. These are all things that could benefit from very nice, high-resolution imaging in tissues with molecular specificity. So what we did is we developed a compact microscope. It is now available to everyone at UT Southwestern, and it provides the best-in-class imaging in chemically preserved tissue specimens. So we've used this microscope to image an entire brain with resolution that's good enough to see individual synapses or the connections between different neurons throughout the entire tissue. As you can see here on the left-hand side, this is the traditional, strong working view of a microscope. And on the top right is the weak working view. So if you went out and spent $500,000, the image on the top right is what you would get, whereas the image on the bottom right is what our technology provides. The top right is very blurry, whereas the bottom is crisp, and you can see those individual synapses throughout the entire volume. So, in collaboration with Dr. Sean Morrison, we have begun looking into other types of samples, and just as an example of the type of data that we're getting and how rich it is, here is a view of the hematopoietic stem cell niche, so it's the bone marrow plug, and highlighted square is this region here. And then within that region here, we're going to highlight it again. And within this volume, you can now see stem cells interacting with the fenestrated sinusoids, where they go into and out of circulation. You can see a capillary, it's the thick orange structure that's going up through the middle, and an axon, which is the green structure that's winding around that capillary. If we had more time, I could go in and show you that there's what appears to be a synapse between the peripheral nervous system and that stem cell, and you can actually see those stem cells going into and out of circulation. This is something that otherwise would have taken weeks to image on a traditional microscope system, and we finished in a few hours, and we had 5 to 10-fold better resolution than what that microscope could actually achieve. So it's a team effort, as always. So I'd like to thank Reto Fioka. He and I are the ones who develop all the technology. If you have any interest in either the Microscopy Innovation Lab, the technology, which is the manuscript, or the business that we are now trying to spin off, feel free to take an image. Those codes will take you to our websites. And I'd also like to thank Sandra Schmid, who is my chair and gave me this opportunity, as well as Dr. David Russell, who was here yesterday, who also provided me with the resources necessary to achieve this research. And lastly, Dr. Gaudens de Neuser, who brought me here from Colorado. So with that, I'd like to thank you all.
Thanks, Kevin. I'd like to introduce the first finalist chosen in the industry category. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bahir Haroun from Texas Instruments.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to introduce today the millimeter wave sensor. It's a development we had at TI that started 2009. And I'll give you the context of how we started this and what was the orientation. So the first slide will show, the first slide will show that millimeter wave has been around actually for a while, for a long time. In fact, the very early radars in World War II were touching on the millimeter wave. They're right there in the 10-ish gigahertz type of numbers, X-band. And very soon thereafter, military has moved up. Very exotic processes, extremely expensive. These are $1 million radars. And the reason why millimeter wave is good, it has these very unique properties. It penetrates through rain and dust and fog, very heavy fog. The wavelength is long, it's millimeters, 1, 2, 3, 4. Today in the radars that are used in cars are 4 millimeters. So the wave runs around the dust. So it can see for hundreds of meters with very low power. And it's very unique versus light and cameras, which have these encumbrances. Once you're into a heavy weather situation, inclement weather, you can't see. But it has also other properties. It penetrates light material, close. A lot of your radars, the scanners in the airports today, they're actually using millimeter waves to go underneath the clothes and kind of look inside boxes. It has very odd properties. So when we looked at it, for automotive, companies have been trying to put in automotive since the late 70s. In fact, way back, we have the information. Germany has tried for so long, until 1999, from 1970, same company, eventually got acquired by Daimler. The first car in 1999, it's a $5,000 plus extra feature. But over the years, from 2000 to 2010, there is usually tens of thousands of cars in the street. So there was an accumulation of statistics of these automatic driving assistants. And if you look at the percentage, the reduction of front collision and lane-changing collisions is not trivial. It's somewhere between 25 and 75% reduction on hundreds of thousands of cars over 10 years. It's a staggering statistic. It saves accidents. 94% of the accidents are human driver error. So there's a significant impact, and just in the US economy, there's $250 billion. This is a 2013 statistic. $250 billion worth of accident costs, direct costs. This is not even including loss of jobs and pain and suffering, whatever. It adds up to $800 billion a year. Worldwide, it's 450. So it's a huge impact. So this was a motivator. How can I take devices between 2000 and 2010, very high-end cars, only the very, very expensive, top-of-the-line Mercedes and BMWs and so on, would have that. Thousands of dollars. Cost of build for these, they have copper, they have gold traces to get the very smooth metal to reduce losses, mechanical steering, complex, hundreds of dollars worth of cost. But you really want it in every car. And how do you get this? How do you do what we did in cell phones 15 years ago to enable a $200 phone, $300 phone, simple link? You remember the early 90s? They became $20 in 2004. There's similar approaches. That's what Rich Templeton said yesterday. We know how to take this complexity down, this large number of components that are very expensive. And that's what we did. But before we started, we also realized there's other applications, like monitoring drowsiness. With drowsy, figure out if a person's head is moving down. There are applications MIT have identified. You can use millimeter wave or even lower frequencies to get heart rates for babies, so you can detect their breathing rate and so on for SIDS. There is research going on in Japan using millimeter wave because the way you move at old age, your trajectory has motion, the Doppler effect is very indicative. So what we did, and this is really the research to a product. Next slide. We started in Kilby Labs, a team of 5 people, in 2009. By 2012, we took an approach to look at the system. Everybody was using exotic processes, either gallium arsenide, very expensive $20,000 wafers, and standard CMOS used for microcontrollers and processors that we're selling at very high volume, big pipes of production. But traditionally, we're building less than 6 gigahertz type of circuits. How do we get them to operate at 10x, 80 gigahertz, which is really the band allocated for radar? So we re-looked at the entire construction of the devices and how you lay it out, because every 100 micron of route is a loss and it's an impedance. I mean, if I move a few hundred microns on the chip, I flip the polarity of the signal. So we rebuilt the 3D, rebuilt the modeling approach, figured out how to take the signal into the package. I saw a cross-section, the silicon sits at the bottom, very short routes to the antennas. We fundamentally changed that. In a couple of years, we also had a goal of twice the frequency to really look at the edge, on the edge of where the process actually fails to give gain. And we designed a system that works. And then from that point, 2012, we actually teamed up with an automotive manufacturer in Germany that was convinced this, if you can build me surround, put 8 of them, 8 radars around the car, I can see all around me, and I can create safety. And that's what we did. And it took us about a year to actually take this technology and build a test chip, not a product, and put 8 of them and drove them and had a video showing we can see, and we can see in the rain and fog. And that's when we started the business unit. And the team of 5, at the time we built the test chip, we were about 10 people. The investment increased significantly into tens of people. And today, we announced to the market 2017. We have samples in the market 2018. And today, the first products are in the hands of some of the cars. So you'll actually see that towards the end of this year and early next year, the first cars, and actually many, many other customers. Let me show you in the next slide what we did. So we built a number of products that have antennas in the packages that go directly into these units in cars. You can see here, I can show an image, I don't think you can see it, but there's a car parked at 112 meters, 2 cars with a person standing in the middle. You can see this in sunshine with a camera, can barely discern at 112, but if there is a little bit of fog or rain, you cannot see at 112 meters by a camera. But the radar gets it very accurately in separation. And that's kind of where the value of safety in cars, so even if you're under heavy weather, you still get the warning. The cars today pull the brakes and prevent you from collision. And those who've driven cars with this, especially the recent cars that have the more expensive modules, they do not want to drive without them. Now, on the other side, we actually got a lot of traction. We released a lot of EVMs at low cost. I'm holding one. It's $100. And that little 15 millimeter on the side, that's the entire chip. That's the whole sensor, everything with a USB connector. You can snap it off, and that's and the chip is much cheaper than that, and Rich alluded. It costs us sub $10 to build, so we sell it in the tens of dollars, depending on the features. And so people have done building monitoring, security around perimeters, same deal, weather is impacted. People have done synthetic apertures. You see the box there, it's a cardboard box. You can see actually there's a scissor inside, so you can actually detect. So it kind of does imaging. We've measured heart rate and breathing rate. And a lot of universities have other applications. In fact, one of the things, once we managed to show that this is actually working with a single chip like this, a lot of folks said, well, let's put it inside the car and monitor babies. So what we have achieved is we actually, in Texas, there's no child left behind. We think in a few years, or a couple of years, this will actually be, look inside cars, it will know there is a baby, maybe even completely covered, so the camera would never know there is a baby, but you can see they're breathing. And the car would not lock, will turn on, will give a beep. You have a human, and you're living in the car. In fact, you can even tell if it's a baby. And this is a completely different, we've never anticipated that type of use. But once you enable a new technology and get it at the right cost structure, it's just, people start using it in completely different ways. So we probably have way more customers, obviously lower volume in the beyond automotive than we are in automotive. Automotive is the biggest driver, safety and so on. So we have many, many patents generated over the journey. First 15 fundamental, and then added 60 for safety and self-checking and calibration to reduce the cost of even the system deployment. So I think I gave you a good overview. It's a business that's built right here and designed in the business here in Texas, and it's obviously manufactured worldwide. We have multiple manufacturing sites. So that's kind of the status of a 10-year from start to end to 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahir. I'd like to introduce our next finalist in the industry category is Michael Miller from Southwest Research Institute.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you about the LotusFlo story and the development of this coating. Can I have the next slide? First, I want to introduce my co-principal investigators on this program. This was a very dedicated team effort involving many people, more than are shown here. In particular, Dr. Ronghua Wei, and Dr. Kent Coulter are the co-PIs, along with our sponsors, which all this work was sponsored commercially by Shell, and our third-party fabricator is a company called Shawcor, and Dina Nicola is representing Shawcor in that photo. Next slide. So what is LotusFlo? LotusFlo is a coating technology that basically keeps offshore drilling pipes from being clogged by various substances. The key substances in this case are shown in these photos. On the left, methane hydrates, which typically occur on flowline pipe, which sit on the bed of the ocean floor and are very difficult to mediate to prevent clogging of pipe in that case. Other types of substances include paraffins, waxes, which are quite sticky, as well as very nasty substances called asphaltenes, which are very tenacious on surfaces of steel pipe. The problem is that such clogs are very costly to remove. Generally, they cost millions of dollars per day in lost production, as well as the cost of being able to remove those plugs. So what this story is about is development of a solution in which we invented a coating that can be applied to the internal surface of pipe, of drill pipe, that would prevent this type of materials from sticking to the surface of the pipe. And this is done through a process. It's a vacuum deposition process that we ignite a plasma inside of the pipe, and we introduce chemical precursors, which are then deposited on the inside of the surface of that pipe. Have the next slide. So what I'm showing here, I'm sorry this is not very readable. It wasn't really meant to be readable from your vantage point, but I wanted to give you an overview of the maturation of this process, this development. It actually started from basic science. We were actually doing molecular simulations at one point to try to understand the physics and the chemistry adhesion of things like asphaltenes on surfaces, which then led to the development of the chemistry which now works, which we call the Lotus family chemistry and the process. And we essentially started from coupons, which is all the way on the left of that time scale, to coating short lengths of pipe, about 5 feet, and then we learned how to coat 10 feet, and then finally 20 feet of pipe, or actually 40 feet of pipe, and then we linked 240 pieces of pipe together to coat 80 feet at one time. And that's done by igniting a plasma inside that entire length of pipe and achieving a very homogeneous plasma deposition, which then gives us a very high water contact angle. It's hydrophobic coating. And the hydrophobicity, though, is tailored to the types of deposits that we're trying to mitigate from sticking on it. We also had to develop, as you can imagine, the actual types of power supplies that we use to ignite this plasma, because what we actually want to do is we want to very carefully fragment these chemical precursors that are introduced in the plasma into other species and adducts and ions, which are very rapidly accelerated to the surface of the pipe. And then they polymerize and form other reactions and products on that surface, which gives us the properties that we want. Next slide. So this is one of our pilot scale facilities. It's able to coat 2 lines simultaneously, 80 feet of pipe altogether per line. And this technology has now been successfully transitioned to our third-party fabricator, which is Shawcor. And we have coated over 160,000 feet of pipe since the development of this technology. And it is now commercially available through Shawcor. You can purchase coated pipe with the LotusFlo coating. So I guess the one takeaway message is through this whole process is that traversing the valley of death is really, really hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So our next finalist in the industry category, who has the honor of being our final finalist, is Sarah Remmert from Shell Global Solutions US.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Sarah Remmert, and today I want to talk to you about an innovation that is over 50 years in the making, but one that I think is just as relevant to the future of industry today as it was when it first began. But before I want to talk about what that innovation is, I want to set the context for why it matters. And it matters for a very simple reason. The world is facing an energy transition and a mobility transition, and that's really underpinned by 3 key things. The first is a changing population, a growing population, and one that's more urbanized. By 2050, we anticipate that there's going to be about 10 billion people in the world, and 70% of them are going to be living in cities. The second is an increase in demand. This means an increase in both energy and mobility demand. The IEA predicts that we're going to need a quarter of today's energy more in 2040 than we need today, and also predicts that by 2050 we're going to have 3 times the number of vehicles on the road than we have today. So how do we meet that demand? And the third is really an industry-wide challenge. We need to meet that demand, but we absolutely have to do it in a sustainable way that reduces our CO2 emissions to address climate change. And at Shell, we really believe that 2 things are critical to addressing this challenge. The first is technology innovation, which is really at the heart of everybody's focus in this room. But the second is also cross-industry collaboration, where we really believe that addressing challenges of this magnitude require coming together to find solutions that we couldn't find when we were addressing them in isolation. Yesterday, Dr. Sheffield from Pioneer mentioned the significant role that natural gas is going to play in navigating the energy transition. And at Shell, we believe that natural gas is important beyond its use just as an energy source, but also as a source for a precursor for the production of liquid hydrocarbon products. And that's really the innovation that I want to talk to you about today, which is Shell gas to liquids technology. The simple idea that you can take methane, natural gas, go through a Fischer-Tropsch synthesis and post-refining process to produce very pure, very free from impurities like nitrogen, aromatic, and sulfur content, liquid hydrocarbon products that can confer significant performance advantages relative to their counterparts produced directly from crude oil. This is a process, as I mentioned before, which has been over 50 years in the making. We have over 3,500 patents in this space, both on process technology as well as use in the field. And it's at commercial scale. We have a plant in Qatar that's called Pearl, which is responsible for producing a slate of different GTL-based products. Just to name a few, very clean burning GTL diesel fuel, aviation jet fuel that's produced in part from GTL kerosene, process oils, and really what I want to focus on today, which is GTL base oil. Now, GTL base oil produced from natural gas has significant performance advantages beyond just its purity. Because of the structure of the molecule, it's a linear hydrocarbon with minor branching. It has really good viscosity characteristics, low temperature performance characteristics, low volatility, and high oxidation stability that makes it really good for use in lubricants. So let's talk about lubricants. Lubricants play a key role in looking at the energy transition for two reasons. First is they're entirely designed to remove friction from any system, so they can deliver improved efficiency directly. But a more subtle element is they can also enable improved efficiency as well, and this means that as hardware advances, it faces new technical challenges that weren't there before, and by really combining the optimal fluid with the optimal hardware, you can really unlock performance advantages that weren't there before through collaboration. Shell is really proud to be the #1 lubricant supplier for 13 years in a row, and we're also really proud to say that GTL technology is at the heart of many of our high-performing products. In the automotive space, we see a trend towards even lower viscosity oils. In the US market, increasingly we're seeing an increase in 0W20 grade oils, and even the introduction of a 0W16 category as well. And GTL really enables the formulation of these oils, not just because it allows for that low viscosity efficiency, but also it has other properties that allow us to move into that formulation space. Last year, we were really proud to launch our first energy-efficient hydraulic oil, which is based on GTL technology, enabling up to a 5% improvement in energy efficiency compared to previous products. We also use GTL technology across a number of different sectors, our high-performance turbine and transformer oils, and finally, an emerging area for us is actually the use of GTL technology for immersed computing, that is, direct cooling of data centers, which we anticipate to grow to up to 4% of the total annual energy consumption. So if we can improve efficiency in cooling of data centers, then that can also have a significant impact on the energy transition going forward. Finally, I want to end by mentioning our work in the e-fluids and future mobility space. This is an area of diverse technology that's really emerging. It's an exciting area. We're seeing new developments in the area of traditional internal combustion engines all the way through to hybrid powertrain systems, through to full battery electric vehicles. And the technical solutions that equipment manufacturers are pursuing in this space is really broad, and that means that we need to have the right fluids to be able to address those challenges. GTL technology is really promising in this space, not just because of its use as a base oil for traditional lubricants, but also because of its thermal properties and electrical compatibility with electrical components, which makes it really unique in the use of transmission e-fluids for e-motors, as well as for direct immersion cooling of battery systems. So this is an active area of research. We're proud to have launched our first products in this space, but we continue to innovate. We continue to innovate both in terms of the products that we develop as well as the GTL process. But two things are definitely going to remain consistent going forward. It's that technology innovation is going to be at the core of what we do here, but also cross-industry collaboration, sponsored by organizations such as TAMEST, are really going to be critical to enabling our success to meet these challenges. So thank you very much.